Sariah Wendell and her daughter Livia Monroe never imagined they would fall in love with the same man, let alone carry his children. But when the truth about Devan Caulder's twisted double life unraveled, what began as romantic bliss turned into a chilling tale of betrayal, obsession, and murder. Their lives, once quiet and ordinary, became the center of a shocking crime that would leave a trail of heartbreak, scandal, and one brutal ending no one saw coming. Devan Cross arrived in the town of Brookmere during the early weeks of autumn, when the leaves began to turn gold and the small streets bustled with quiet routines. Nobody knew where he came from. He told people he was from Atlanta, scouting investment opportunities in small, untapped communities. His smile was magnetic, his stories full of excitement, and his voice carried the kind of confidence that made people listen. He said he was a real estate developer, with clients from across the country and a few luxury properties under his name. But no one ever saw any paperwork or business cards, just polished charm and the ability to make people feel seen. What the people of Brookmere didn't know was that Devan Cross didn't exist anywhere on paper. He was a man built on lies, a drifter with a history of vanishing just before the truth caught up with him. Sariah Bellamy first met him on a slow Tuesday afternoon. She was working the lunch shift at the town's only 24-hour diner, a modest place called Lula's Grill, the kind of place where regulars sat at the counter and tourists were rare. Sariah was 42, worn down by years of raising her daughter alone after her ex-husband walked out and never looked back. Life hadn't given her much to smile about, but she kept going with a steady sense of duty and a warm demeanor that regulars appreciated. She noticed Devan the moment he walked in. New face, nice watch, city clothes. He ordered coffee and a slice of apple pie, then struck up conversation. He asked about the town, her job, her life. He listened more than he spoke, and when he did talk, it was all about growth, future plans, and the wealth that lay in forgotten places like Brookmere. Sariah was cautious. She'd met slick talkers before, but Devan didn't rush her. He came, in every day for the next week, always sitting at the same booth, tipping generously, and asking how her day had gone. Slowly, she let him in. He told her he admired her work ethic. He asked to walk her home one night when her shift ended late. She agreed. He said all the right things, made her feel like maybe, just maybe, she hadn't been forgotten by the world. After all, within a month, Devan was living with her. He brought a single duffel bag, saying his place in Atlanta was undergoing renovations. Sariah didn't ask for proof. She had started to believe in the dream he painted. A future without worry, a man who saw her as more than just a tired waitress. Not long after moving in, Devan was introduced to Sariah's daughter, Livia Bellamy. Livia was 20, a bright and driven nursing student who lived in a small apartment near the local community college. She was ambitious, practical, and had grown up watching her mother struggle. Because of this, she'd always tried to stay focused, avoiding distractions like dating. But when she met Devan, she felt an unexpected spark. He was older, confident, and unlike the boys her age who still lived at home. At first, she thought he was just her mother's boyfriend. But the way he spoke to her, the compliments, the extra attention, the lingering glances, made her feel something strange. She pushed it aside at first. It was probably nothing. Devan, however, knew exactly what he was doing. He had a pattern: find vulnerability, exploit it, and move on. He watched Livia carefully, studying the cracks in her confidence. She was smart, but like her mother, she longed to be seen, valued, and heard. Devan began texting her under the guise of sharing news about her mother. He joked with her, sent flattering comments about her photos, and slowly blurred the lines between friendly and flirtatious. Before long, Livia was drawn in. It was dangerous and wrong, but she told herself there was something different about Devan. He made her feel mature, chosen, and unlike anyone else. Sariah, meanwhile, was falling deeper into the fantasy. Devan told her he was planning to buy a house in Brookmere, a modern one just outside town with a view of the lake. He said he'd put it in her name. But he needed a little help first. There were fees, closing costs, a few $1,000s, for processing. Sariah dipped into her savings, handing over the money with trust. Devan thanked her with gifts, dinners, and whispered promises of marriage. He said he wanted to build a family with her. He even hinted about having kids. By then, Devan was juggling 2 lives, one with Sariah and one with Livia. He visited Livia's apartment at odd hours, always with some excuse. She asked questions, but he deflected with practiced ease. He claimed his relationship with Sariah was just a cover until he figured things out. He said he was choosing her, not her mother. Livia, young and in love, believed him. She believed him enough to let him stay over, enough to dream of a future, enough to give him money when he asked. Devan's manipulation ran deep. He crafted an illusion so convincing that neither woman suspected the truth. They didn't see the red flags, the missing documents, the fake phone calls, the way he always had a reason not to show proof of anything. Devan had played this game in other towns, with other women. Each time, he changed his name, his story, his plans, and each time, he vanished before anyone could stop him. But Brookmere was different. This time, Devan Cross was not going to get away. He had no idea that the lies he told to 2 women under the same roof were about to explode in a way he couldn't control, and the secrets he buried would soon become the reason for his brutal end. Sariah Bellamy spent her mornings preparing coffee and humming to the radio, unaware that the man she loved was slipping out of her life piece by piece. Devan Cross had now fully immersed himself in a double life, playing both mother and daughter, like a seasoned actor, performing with different masks depending on who stood before him. The cozy home they shared, with its floral curtains and hand-me-down furniture, became the stage where a silent deception grew stronger each day. Devan had perfected the art of manipulation. With Sariah, he was attentive and romantic. He helped around the house, made breakfast, and even left little notes on the fridge that read things like, "Can't wait to grow old with you," and "Our future is brighter than ever." To her, he was the man she had prayed for. But the moment he left for errands, his attention shifted elsewhere, toward Livia. He had memorized their schedules. He knew when Sariah's shifts began and ended. He knew how long her grocery runs usually took. With each calculated move, he deepened the web he wove around both women. Livia, despite her intelligence, had become emotionally vulnerable under Devan's spell. She told herself what she was doing wasn't wrong, not really. She convinced herself that her mother's relationship with Devan was falling apart anyway, and that what she shared with him was more genuine. He filled her head with romantic fantasies, saying they could one day move away from the town and start fresh. He even brought her a silver locket, claiming it had belonged to his grandmother, though it still had the tag from a local pawn shop. The most shocking part came weeks later, when Livia sat staring at a home pregnancy test on her bathroom sink. It was positive. Her stomach turned, not just from morning sickness, but from the weight of what this meant. She hesitated for days before telling Devan. He didn't react with shock or fear. Instead, he smiled and told her he was ready to be a father. He said this changed everything. He even talked about naming the baby and promised he'd take care of both of them. Livia felt relieved and hopeful. She believed he was sincere. Meanwhile, Sariah was experiencing her own strange symptoms: fatigue, nausea, a missed period. She dismissed it at first. At 42, she never imagined she'd become pregnant again. But when she finally took a test, it confirmed the unthinkable. She, too, was carrying Devan's child. When she told him, his reaction was identical to what he told Livia: pure joy, promises, and an embrace that felt like reassurance. What she didn't know was that he had already rehearsed the same performance days earlier. Devan's calm demeanor masked his rising panic. He never planned for this. 2 pregnancies meant complications, responsibility, and attention. He started pulling money from both women more frequently, inventing reasons like baby supplies, doctor visits, and new housing deposits. Livia gave him her financial aid check, thinking it was a small price for their future. Sariah dipped deeper into her emergency fund. Devan took it all, telling each woman what they needed to hear. He told Livia he was searching for a small apartment just for them, away from her mother's house, where they could raise their baby in peace. He told Sariah that they should consider buying a bigger home for their growing family. All the while, he was slowly packing what little he owned into a rental storage unit 2 towns over. His plan was simple. Once he had squeezed them dry, he would vanish, just like he had before. What he didn't count on was the town beginning to notice. Brookmere was small, and people talked. A cashier at the pharmacy mentioned to Sariah that Devan had been in earlier with Livia, buying vitamins and talking about prenatal care. Sariah laughed it off at first, assuming the clerk had been mistaken, but the seed of doubt had been planted. Then came the strange phone call. Sariah overheard Devan whispering late at night in the hallway, something about keeping things quiet and not slipping up. When she confronted him, he blamed it on business calls and kissed her forehead. Her suspicions began to fester. She started watching him more closely. His phone was always on silent. He never left it out of sight. He often left the house without explanation. When she asked questions, he became overly sweet or overly defensive, never in between. Her gut told her something was wrong, but her heart refused to believe it. That was, until she did the one thing she had never done before. She went through his phone. He had forgotten it on the nightstand. While he was out at the store, Sariah opened it. At first, there were just a few texts, some sweet messages to her, a calendar reminder. Then she found a hidden messaging app. Inside, dozens of messages from Livia, intimate, excited, full of love. They spoke of their baby, their plans, their secret, pictures too. Sariah scrolled in disbelief, feeling the air leave her lungs. Her heart pounded in her ears as the truth crashed down on her. Her daughter was pregnant by the same man she thought would save her from loneliness. For hours, she sat frozen. Then, without thinking, she got in her car and drove straight to Livia's apartment. The confrontation was explosive. Both women realized in real time how deeply they had been manipulated. Livia broke down, horrified by the betrayal. She had no idea her mother was pregnant too. They shouted, they cried, they stared at each other with shattered trust. Then came silence, the heavy, eerie kind. Devan Cross had managed to destroy the bond between a mother and daughter in one sweeping con. Instead of turning on each other completely, they turned their attention to him. Together, they planned to confront him. Not with rage, but with facts. They wanted answers. They wanted to hear him admit it. But Devan had already sensed the walls closing in. He knew something had changed. He was preparing to leave Brookmere that night, just as he had done many times before. But what he didn't know was that Sariah and Livia were already waiting for him. This time, he wasn't going to get away. And this time, someone wouldn't make it out alive. The air in Brookmere was still that evening. A strange calm hung over the town, as if nature itself was holding its breath. Sariah sat in the dimly lit kitchen, her hands wrapped tightly around a lukewarm cup of tea that had gone untouched for hours. Across from her sat Livia, pale and trembling, her eyes swollen from crying. They had barely spoken since discovering the truth, but now there was nothing left to deny. The man they both loved, the father of their unborn children, was a fraud, an expert manipulator who played them both to satisfy his own twisted ambitions. Their emotions shifted rapidly. Shock gave way to sorrow, sorrow to disbelief, and disbelief to pure, searing anger. Sariah had spent years building a quiet, stable life after her divorce. She thought Devan had brought her peace. Instead, he had planted a poison in her home, one that seeped into every corner of her world, even into her relationship with her only daughter. Livia, still in her early 20s, felt like her entire future had been stolen. She had imagined love, security, and a new life with Devan. Now she saw only betrayal. layered with shame and regret. They made a plan, not to confront him in a violent rage, but to trap him in his own lies. They knew he would return that night, as he always did. Sariah texted him as usual, pretending nothing had changed. She told him she'd made dinner and wanted to talk about baby names. Her tone was sweet, composed, just as he expected. He replied with heart emojis and said he'd be home soon. He had no idea both women knew the truth. He had no idea they were waiting for him, not with love, but with judgment. Devan parked his car outside the house around 9 p.m. He walked in like a man without a care, his arms full of groceries and a grin plastered across his face. The moment he stepped into the kitchen and saw both Sariah and Livia sitting together, silent and expressionless, the grin faded. He paused, eyes darting between them. Something was wrong. He felt it immediately. Sariah calmly told him to sit. Her tone was cold but steady. Livia didn't look at him. She kept her gaze fixed on the tabletop, her hands clenched in her lap. Devan tried to play it off, laughing nervously and asking what was going on. But his charm no longer worked. They started asking questions. At first, gently, about the money he borrowed, the trips he said he had taken, the messages they both found. He fumbled, stuttered, offered weak explanations. When Sariah pulled out printed screenshots from his hidden messages, the color drained from his face. The mask slipped. His words turned defensive, his voice rising. He blamed them both, said they misunderstood, said it wasn't what it looked like. But neither woman believed him anymore. They saw through him. Everything unraveled quickly after that. The calm in the kitchen cracked into chaos. Accusations flew. Livia threw the silver locket at him, demanding to know how many others he had lied to. Sariah demanded to know what his endgame had been. Was he going to disappear with their money, leave them to raise children alone? He offered no answers, only excuses. Then came the final blow. Sariah told him she had reported his identity to a private investigator. She had suspicions for weeks and had finally acted. The report revealed what neither of them had expected. Devan Cross was not even his real name. He had used at least 3 different aliases in the past 5 years, each tied to women he had conned, dated, and vanished from. Some left in debt, others pregnant, and abandoned. He was a serial manipulator, hopping from town to town like a ghost. Panic flickered in his eyes. He stood suddenly, knocking over his chair. His voice shook as he warned them not to ruin his life. But the irony in that statement was not lost on them. He had already ruined theirs. Before either woman could react, Devan grabbed Sariah's phone and slammed it against the wall, shattering it into pieces. Then he stormed toward the door. Livia moved to block him, and that's when the situation turned. He shoved her aside, hard enough to make her stumble. That was the moment Sariah snapped. She grabbed the heavy glass teapot from the stove and hurled it at him. It missed, crashing into the wall behind him, but it was enough to startle him. He turned back, enraged. What followed was a blur of shouting, pushing, and chaos. Livia lunged at him, striking his chest. He retaliated with a backhand that sent her crumpling to the floor. Sariah screamed and grabbed a kitchen knife from the counter. She didn't plan to use it, not at first, but when she saw him raise his foot as if to kick Livia again, something inside her broke. The next moments were fast and violent. She rushed forward and stabbed him. Once, then twice. He stumbled back, gasping. Blood bloomed across his shirt. He collapsed against the wall, eyes wide in disbelief. For a few moments, there was silence again. Then he slid to the floor, unmoving. Livia, still conscious but in pain, crawled toward her mother. Sariah dropped the knife, her hands trembling. She hadn't meant to kill him, only to stop him, but it was too late. Devan Cross, if that was even his real name, was dead. The aftermath was a blur of sirens, police reports, and flashing red lights. Sariah confessed everything, sobbing as she held her daughter's hand. The authorities were stunned at the bizarre case. 2 pregnant women, mother and daughter, both deceived by the same man, leading to a fatal confrontation. What made the case even more tragic was the quiet love that still remained between the two women. Despite all that had happened, they had protected each other in the end. Their bond, though scarred, had not been destroyed, but nothing would erase the truth of that night. Nothing would change the fact that a con man's web of lies ended not with a quiet escape, but with brutal murder in the home he had poisoned from the start. The days following Devan's death passed in a haze. Brookmere, a quiet town that rarely made headlines, was suddenly consumed with whispers, speculation, and judgment. News travelled fast, especially a story so twisted and unbelievable. A man found dead in a suburban kitchen, 2 pregnant women claiming to be his lovers, and the most shocking detail of all, the women were mother and daughter. Local media had a field day. The front pages were filled with headlines that screamed scandal. Everyone wanted to know how such a tangled web had formed without anyone noticing. Neighbors were stunned. Friends avoided eye contact in grocery stores. Some called it a crime of passion. Others whispered about madness. But none of them knew the full truth. Only Sariah and Livia understood the emotional wreckage they were left to sift through. Detectives spent hours interviewing them separately. They combed through every corner of the house, photographing the broken phone, the shattered teapot, the bloodstains on the kitchen tiles. Both women were taken into custody, but later released pending investigation. Their pregnancies complicated everything. The DA's office debated whether to charge Sariah with second-degree murder or manslaughter. Her confession was clear, but the context made the case murky. There was no sign of premeditation, no evidence of plotting, only panic, pain, and an instinct to protect her daughter. Livia spent most of her time in bed, unable to speak without her voice breaking. She clutched her belly often, as if trying to make sense of the life growing inside her, a life that was now tied to a man who had shattered her world. She felt guilt and shame, even though everyone told her it wasn't her fault. The thought of raising Devan's child, knowing what he had done, filled her with dread, but a part of her still held on, unsure if she could bring herself to end the pregnancy. Sariah, meanwhile, stayed quiet and numb. Her home had become a crime scene, her life under a microscope. She spent hours staring out the window, avoiding mirrors and refusing visitors. The weight of what she had done, killing a man with her own hands, pressed down on her chest like a stone. She didn't regret protecting her daughter, but she couldn't erase the image of Devan's lifeless eyes. It haunted her in every corner of the house. As the legal system took its slow course, a deeper investigation into Devan's past began. Authorities discovered that his real name was Jalen Ricks. His background was littered with failed marriages, restraining orders, and fraud accusations. He had used fake names in nearly every state he'd lived in. In Colorado, he conned a woman out of her life savings. In Texas, he abandoned a woman after she gave birth to his child. In each case, he vanished before police could catch up. There were no photos of him online, no active social media profiles, no consistent paper trail. He had mastered the art of disappearing. That made the Brookmere case even more chilling. Had Sariah not acted when she did, he might have escaped again, might have moved to another town, started another cycle of manipulation. The court began to see the bigger picture. Sariah hadn't killed a man in cold blood. She had ended a predator's reign. Public opinion began to shift. Support for the women grew as more details emerged. Strangers sent letters, offering prayers and donations. Women from other towns reached out to share similar stories, tales of being misled, used, and abandoned by charming liars like Jalen. A few even believed they too were carrying his child. The pattern was undeniable. This wasn't just a twisted love triangle. It was a web of exploitation that stretched far beyond Brookmere. Still, the law required a process. Sariah's attorney argued for leniency, presenting a full psychological evaluation. It showed she suffered from PTSD, trauma-induced anxiety, and extreme emotional distress at the time of the killing. Her record was clean. She had no history of violence. She wasn't a danger to society. She was a mother who made a split-second decision in defense of her daughter. The case dragged on for months. Prosecutors eventually offered a plea deal, voluntary manslaughter with no prison time, but mandatory counseling and house arrest for 1 year. It was controversial, but the evidence of Jalen's deceit was overwhelming. The court recognized that while a life had been taken, the real villain had been exposed long before he died. Sariah accepted the deal quietly, with no desire to fight. She returned home, not as a free woman, but as one who carried the heavy burden of memory. The kitchen was remodeled, the blood-stained floor replaced, but the scars remained, deep beneath the surface. Livia chose to keep her baby. She said it wasn't about Devan anymore. It was about finding something good in a sea of darkness. She wanted to break the cycle, to raise her child with honesty and love, not secrets and shame. Her pregnancy became her anchor, a way to reclaim her future. It wouldn't be easy. Nothing about her life would ever be the same. But she had strength now. Strength born from truth, pain, and survival. Mother and daughter began to heal in silence. There were no celebrations, no grand declarations. Just long walks, therapy sessions, and quiet evenings holding hands. They had lost something precious, not just a man, but the illusions they'd built around him. In their place, they began to build something real. Fragile, but real. Brookmere moved on eventually, as all towns do. The media stopped calling, the headlines faded. But the story of Sariah and Livia never left the minds of those who knew it. It served as a grim reminder that deception can hide behind the warmest smiles, and that love, when twisted by lies, can turn deadly. And yet, even in the wreckage, there was a faint light. Not every ending is clean. Some are soaked in blood and confusion. But for Sariah and Livia, the ending wasn't just about loss. It was about survival. And in that survival, there was the beginning of something new, something honest, something worth living for. The months following the trial brought a fragile stillness to Sariah and Livia's world. House arrest confined Sariah within the walls of her home, but that physical limitation was nothing compared to the emotional prison she inhabited. Each room still echoed with memories of deception, betrayal, and the irreversible moment her hands had ended a life. Outside, the seasons changed, but inside, time moved differently. Slow, heavy, measured by therapy sessions, court-mandated updates, and the gradual growth of Livia's unborn child. Livia's pregnancy became the center of their lives, a strange symbol of both devastation and hope. She moved with a quiet determination, making plans for the baby with more resolve than joy. She chose not to find out the baby's gender. The truth felt too complicated to name. Her body carried evidence of a man who had nearly destroyed her. Family! And yet this child was hers now, her choice, her future. She read parenting books, attended appointments, and kept a journal filled with entries that mixed dread with a fierce desire to become someone her child could be proud of. Sariah, although still burdened, slowly stepped back into her role as a mother. She cooked again, though her appetite rarely joined her. She helped Livia prepare the nursery in the spare bedroom, painting the walls a soft grey. The crib, the changing table, and the tiny socks reminded them both that something new was coming, something that demanded healing whether they were ready or not. Meanwhile, the community's reaction remained divided. While many had come to sympathize with their story, others held on to resentment. Whispers still floated through supermarkets and post offices. Some people believed Sariah had gotten away with murder. Others couldn't forgive Livia for her involvement, even if it was unintentional. But neither woman had time to explain themselves to strangers. They focused on surviving each day, on breathing through the weight of regret and pressing forward, for the sake of what was coming. It was during one of her routine counseling sessions that Livia finally said it out loud. She admitted she was terrified of becoming like Devan. The darkness she'd seen in him made her question everything inside herself. How had she missed the signs? How had she allowed herself to fall for someone who had clearly rehearsed his lies? With expert precision? The counselor assured her that recognizing manipulation didn't always come easily, especially when the manipulator was as skilled as Devan had been. She hadn't failed. She'd been targeted. Sariah, in her own therapy, unpacked years of loneliness and longing that had made her vulnerable to someone like him. After her divorce and the sudden death of her parents, she had craved companionship more than she realized. Devan's attention had seemed like salvation at first. Gentle words, thoughtful gifts, and the illusion of being seen. She had ignored small red flags, brushing them off as quirks or signs of a difficult past. But those red flags had grown into weapons she never expected to face. The truth came in layers, each one more difficult than the last. But facing it became the only way through. As spring arrived, so did small moments of clarity. They planted a garden in the backyard, filling it with lavender, rosemary, and white daisies. The act felt symbolic. Digging into the earth, placing something delicate into the soil, and trusting it to grow. It was therapy in its own quiet form. Each sprout reminded them that life could still bloom after devastation. Livia went into labor one quiet evening in late April. Sariah rushed her to the hospital, her ankle monitor granting emergency leeway. The birth was long and painful, but when it was over, the baby, a girl, entered the world with a loud cry and tiny clenched fists. Livia held her close, eyes wet with exhaustion and awe. She named her Elira, meaning free one. The name felt fitting. This child, born from chaos, would carry no chains. Holding Elira in her arms for the first time, Sariah felt something shift inside her. A sense of peace she hadn't known in months. The baby's soft coos and unblinking gaze offered forgiveness in its purest form, not spoken, not earned, but freely given by a life untouched by the horrors of its origins. Over the next weeks, their days became filled with lullabies, late-night feedings, and quiet awe. The house, once heavy with silence, now echoed with the sounds of new beginnings. Sariah completed her final therapy sessions and was officially released from house arrest. There was no celebration, no fanfare, just a small walk around the block, breathing in the spring air like it was her first breath in years. With her freedom restored, she enrolled in community service at a local women's shelter. There, she met others who had endured manipulation, abuse, and betrayal. Her story wasn't unique, and in that realization came strength. She began to speak, quietly at first, then with growing conviction, about the warning signs of emotional predators, about how love, when used as a weapon, could do more damage than fists. Livia, too, found purpose in the aftermath. She began writing a memoir, part confession, part warning, for women who had ever felt the sting of deception. The process was slow, but each page was a release, a way to reclaim her voice after months of being spoken about, but never fully heard. In time, Brookmere moved on, as towns do. New scandals took over headlines. New stories replaced the old. But Sariah and Livia had found something no one could take from them. A life rebuilt on painful honesty, guarded trust, and the pure, unfiltered love of a child who knew nothing of the storm she'd been born into. The tragedy that had nearly destroyed them became a lesson neither would forget. Devan, Jalen, had stolen more than their trust. He had left scars that would never fully fade. But he hadn't won. His lies hadn't broken them. Instead, they had forged something stronger in the fire he left behind. Mother and daughter walked forward side by side, not as victims, not as enemies, but as survivors. And in Elira's soft laugh and curious eyes, they found the kind of love that needed no manipulation, no disguise, only truth.